Guilty by Association, a Safe Haven Orphanage Mystery, an audio series by Patricia Asedegbega. Episode 4. It felt good to be in the morning shift. It meant she did not have to be escorted home or help close up. It was a relief not to have to wait for that last customer to leave. Sometimes it was quite obvious they had no intention of buying anything, but still felt it was fine to walk into a shop so near its closing time to ask questions. "Seriously, Eloise, it doesn't matter at what time you come in. You always manage to arrive late. You know you have to be here at least 15 minutes before we open. Let's hear the excuse for today. Go on, surprise me." Elizabeth, who was stocking up the shelves, moved closer to Bosse and Eloise. If nothing else, the reply promised to be entertaining. "I left home with plenty of time to arrive within those 15 minutes you just mentioned. Then the bus I got on broke down, so we all stayed put, as the driver said it was a simple issue that he would soon fix. But after half an hour, we had to come down, and then more time was wasted because he was refusing to return our fares. I wasn't going to pay a bus twice. So, there I remained, till he gave me back my money," Eloise explained. "I'm not even going to get into the fact that the bus you got into broke down twice last week. I don't understand, if you are running late, why you would then spend more time arguing with the driver of the bus about your fare." Bosse's face reflected the disbelief she felt. "It's the principle behind it all. If you are promised a service and it's not delivered, then you protest until you get some form of compensation. If you have to hold on to the bus conductor's shirt to get it, then so be it," was the answer Bosse received. The supervisor opened her mouth as if to say something else, then shook her head, probably deciding that it would not be of any use. "Elizabeth, come closer. Now listen, you two, things are not looking good at all. I stayed back the other day and searched all over for the missing items from Mrs. Aliou's office. I'm sure that it hasn't escaped your notice that of every worker in this mall, we are the only ones being searched by the security at the entrance. There are going to be changes, so we need to be on our best behaviour. That means no more incidents, no more getting late, and we need to up our sales. Eloise, this goes especially for you. Know your place and step up." With those words, Bosse turned around and the two girls looked at each other. There had been a seriousness in her tone. It left Elizabeth pensive. "You've been here longer than I have. Are these isolated incidents? Have you noticed any issues like these before?" Elizabeth asked Eloise as they both went towards the cart with items for the shelves. "Well, not like it has been happening of late. I've worked here for 4 months, and a few perfume testers have gone missing. It was assumed that some customer was responsible, so they were replaced. No noise was made. We were instructed to be more careful. But sometimes it's difficult to have eyes everywhere, especially if you are attending to a potential buyer. There was someone I did suspect. This young man came in and said he wanted to buy some makeup. I spent like 20 minutes with him, and that day a facial cream went missing. Onami had been in that area on that occasion, and I suspect it had something to do with her resigning so hurriedly. But I got this strange feeling as the man was asking me random questions that weren't really connected, that their mission was for my attention to be on him. I knew 5 minutes into, when I started showing him things, that he wasn't going to buy anything," Eloise said. "Was Oname suspected for only that incident? Because we've had a lot more things happen in this last week than you just described," Elizabeth asked, seeing that Amaka, the cleaning lady, was dusting some shelves. She decided to try and speak to her. She worked in the mornings, so had not been able to get acquainted with her before then. "No, Bosse seemed to have a list of grievances. It felt like she had been planning it for some time. Our boss came in that morning. She likes doing that, surprising us to catch us doing something wrong, and Bosse went into her office to speak to her. After a while, Oname was called in. The next thing I knew, she walked out and told me that she had resigned. I couldn't get much more out of her as one of the security guards was called, and he was instructed to escort her to her locker and watch her take out her stuff. But there was something fishy there. The official explanation was that she resigned, but I suspect that she was fired. Because things did go missing, there was no denying that fact, and after she left, those incidents were no longer mentioned. Wow, I hope that she's been able to get another job. From what you were saying, it feels like there was some personal grievance between herself and Bosse, Elizabeth said. Well, Onome started out on the other shift, and then one day, Adenike and her switched. I was not made privy of what happened there. I actually saw her last week. She's working as a server in that burger place across the street. I waved at her, but she didn't reply. Probably thinks I snitched on her or something. Listen, I need to take this call. If Bosse asks for me, make up some excuse, Eloise said as she started talking into her phone as she walked in the direction of the small office from where Amaka had just come out. Good morning, Ma. I'm Elizabeth. I started working here last week. The woman looked up from her dusting and smiled. She was probably in her early 60s, plump and of small stature. Her hair weaved into cornrows. Good morning. I'm Amaka. You are welcome. How was the first week? The woman asked her, and the young girl decided not to beat about the bush. Well, it has been quite eventful, Elizabeth replied. A few products went missing, and so there has been some tension, especially because we have not been able to find out who is responsible. Yes, I know. I was called on Friday evening by Madam, telling me that some things had gone missing from her office. She asked me a lot of questions. I told her that I only clean the surface, sweep and mop what I can. Sometimes it is quite difficult with all the boxes lying around. I don't have access to the cupboards. They are normally locked. I know Bosse and Emily have a key, but I've never asked for it. I have no business going in there, nor have I ever opened any of the sealed boxes. Why would I endanger my job? I work in 2 other shops here, 2 in the morning, and 1 that I just started in 2 days ago, in the evenings. If I steal anything, they'll all fire me. Word will get around and my children have to eat. No, I told her that it had not been me. Be careful though, not everyone here is what they appear to be. With that last warning, Amaka kept the dusting rag in her pocket, picked up the mop and bucket and proceeded to walk out of the shop. Elizabeth spent the morning in a pensive mood as she mulled over Amaka's words. There was normally a spare key to any locked space. Anyone could find out where it was kept. Her mother, for example, always locked her room whenever she was out of the house and took the key with her. Sadly, she had started doing it when 3 years earlier, their younger brother Peter started going in to take whatever money he could find to buy himself snacks at school. Elizabeth knew where her mother kept a spare in case there was an emergency. Only 3 people knew where the spare was. Well, 3 people and her. She had discovered its whereabouts and had not said a word. Maybe something similar had happened. Maybe there was a spare somewhere. Someone had discovered it and was using it to her advantage. Bosse's pep talk had been effective as, except for a few bathroom breaks from Eloise, they attended to customers non-stop and actually made some good sales. Can you imagine how impertinent that security guard is? He yelled out my name and that I was to open my bag as I was coming in. People turned to look at me. Adenike joined her, the annoyance written all over her face as Elizabeth suppressed a giggle, sure that Jimmy had done it on purpose. Ruth came in at that moment and did not make the effort of hiding how funny she found the situation. Jimmy must be enjoying it, but then you were quite harsh with him the last time he tried to speak to you. But why didn't you just stop and show him? Ruth asked. You know that till further notice we are to show them our bags. That was what I did. I approached Obi, opened bag, and he barely looked at it. I had to tell him to know his place. Can you imagine? He thought I would date an ordinary security guard. I have ambition, aspirations. He thinks having good looks and being charming is the equivalent to success. Well, I carefully explained that it wasn't. I don't date men like him, Adenika replied. My mother says that success is working hard to be a good person and being able to sleep well at night because one is at peace with one's conscience. Elizabeth chimed in, her contribution to the conversation getting a look of scorn from Adenika. Wake up, Elizabeth. That kind of thinking doesn't put food on your table, pay the bills, or get you the things you deserve. See, you can have Jimmy and his success story. I have moved on to greener pastures. My Albert has a job, a good one. Oh, and you need to see his red sports car. Adenika smiled with pride. I hope those greener pastures don't make you look back at a certain point in your life and make you wish you had done things better. At least Jimmy has an honest and necessary job, Elizabeth replied. She had heard the narrative the older girl was trying to sell her before. She also knew what a lot of successful men were up to. Ah, you are still so young. Aim higher. Don't settle, Adenika advised, turning around and walking away to speak to a man that had just come into the shop. Adenika and her lessons in life, Ruth laughed and went to speak to Emily that had beckoned to her. Once again, Elizabeth thought that she had to pay more attention to the lives of her co-workers. One of them was getting a bit more than a salary from the beauty shop. The next morning brought her another opportunity to speak to a marker, knowing that the cleaner started working quite early in the morning to have both shops clean before customers started coming in. Elizabeth also went in earlier, arriving a few minutes after Bosse. What a difference between Eloise and you. From your attitude, it's evident who needs the job more. Your friend is quite delusional if she thinks that being related to the boss is going to give her an edge. The smile that appeared on Bosse's face as she uttered her last words had not been a particularly nice one, like she was privy to some information nobody else had. I was about to take a look around and see what needs stocking up. Here, write down everything on this list and bring it to me. Don't forget there should be 5 of everything except the high-end cosmetics. Bosse handed her a pen and paper and Elizabeth went off to do that. Good morning, Ma, she greeted as she walked past a marker who was mopping the floor. The woman smiled and returned the greeting. There was a lot of ground to cover, so she paid attention to what she had been asked to do, opening compartments where sale products were kept when there was no space on the shelves, or they were too expensive to have them all out. In the perfume section, Elizabeth saw that there were 2 fragrances that only had 1 box behind the corresponding tester. She wrote everything down and then took the list to Bosse. The woman studied it and suddenly frowned, opening the book in which every single sale was documented. These perfumes have not been sold, nor this set of lipsticks, or this wig. Look, Bosse said as Elizabeth looked through the previous day and then turned the pages to see if they had been sold on other days. No need for that. You yourself stocked up yesterday. I gave you the list. Bosse opened one of the drawers and took out a list. It was dated from the day before. She was right. Elizabeth had undertaken the task the previous day, but there had been numerous products, and it was impossible to remember what she had stocked. Had she made a mistake? Maybe not seen the missing items? Elizabeth frowned, trying to remember. Maybe I thought I restocked and I didn't. Her voice trailed off, unsure of what to say. No, impossible. This red check line next to the name of each product means I took them from storage and put them into the cart that I gave to you, which means that they made it out of the office. This was just yesterday. How can't you remember what you did? Bosse's voice was charged with suspicion, and the younger girl did not at all like the look she was getting. "There were a lot of things on the cart. It was full to the brim when you gave it to me. I can't remember every single product I put up, but I can tell you that it was empty by the time I finished," Elizabeth replied. "I'm afraid I can't cover this up. Mrs. Aliou isn't aware of all that has been happening, taking into consideration that all these incidents started happening when you got here. If I were you, I'd start looking for another job," Bosse replied, taking out her phone and walking in the direction of the counter, leaving Elizabeth in a state of shock as she stared at her retreating back. "I heard what she said to you. It's not true. Things have gone missing before. 2 months ago, Ruth, when she was doing exactly what you were asked to do, found that there was a box missing. It had not been on the list that day and had not been sold the previous day. I remember she got very upset, made me come and look at it, just to be sure that her eyes were not deceiving her. Emily even had the effrontery of making me open my bag. I was so upset. I'm old enough to be her mother, and she spoke to me in such a rude way, like I was a common thief. Had I not needed this job, I'd have quit that day." Amarka sighed, the memory still upsetting her. "I'll speak to Ruth. I can assure you that I didn't steal anything. It feels like just because I was the last to arrive, or maybe because I'm from an orphanage, they think that they can pin it on me. I won't be quiet and accept it." Elizabeth's voice shook. She was a strong girl normally, but she was finding the innuendos and suspicions difficult, especially as she could not even prove her own innocence. "From an orphanage? Oh, I'm so happy that you got this job. And see how respectful and well brought up you are. You will go far in life. Don't let anyone drag you back." The woman smiled at her, patted her arm and left. The morning went by quite quickly for Elizabeth. In between attending to customers, she kept going back to the perfume shelves to try to remember what she had done the previous morning. The wigs she could remember, but the other part escaped her. She had familiarized herself with where most things were, but there really had been a lot of products on that cart, and the last bit she had hurried up with, as she had wanted to have it all out before the customers started coming in. The thing was that the products on sale didn't have a security alarm like clothes did. What if it had been a customer? Elizabeth looked around. There were 2 young girls that had come in together. She had approached them in case they needed help, but they had said that they were just looking around. There was a man that Eloise was helping, probably needing a gift, but from Eloise's pose, Elizabeth could tell that her patience was wearing thin. Eloise had been with him for 15 minutes, and if Elizabeth was not mistaken, it was the second time they were returning to the makeup section. It made her smile, momentarily forgetting the sinking feeling that had settled in the pit of her stomach. Bosse had been serious all day, barely saying a word to her, and she hadn't had the chance to speak to the other salesgirl. Eloise always managed to put her mind at ease. An hour before it was time to go home, Emily came in and went directly to the counter, where she exchanged a few words with Bosse. "Elizabeth?" The girl approached her supervisor that had called her. "Take over. By now you know how to do everything in the shop. We're stepping out for a moment." The 2 women left the shop, disappearing into the crowd at the mall. "This gentleman has decided to buy the face cream pack." Eloise placed the pack on the counter in what no one could describe as a delicate manner, rolling her eyes, indicating that if there was a noble prize for patience, she was to be awarded it, without a question. "And a gift. You said if I bought this one, I would be getting a gift," the man said, and Elizabeth opened one of the drawers and added 2 samples, then another one, seeing that the customer was about to say something else. "Oh, that was torture. He asked the price of every single thing. He didn't buy something his wife would like. All he was adamant about was that he had no intention of going over his budget. Meanwhile, he forgot that I attended to him 2 weeks ago, and then he didn't care how much he spent. One doesn't have to be a genius to conclude who he was buying for." "What's wrong? Why are you looking so worried?" Eloise asked. Emily came in early and has gone out to talk to Bosse. 2 more bottles of perfume are missing, and I don't like the way Bosse has been looking at me all morning. I have a terrible feeling. Oh, here they are. They don't look any happier than when they left. Elizabeth studied the 2 women walking towards them. Elizabeth, come with us, Bosse commanded, and after sending Eloise a look of terror, the salesgirl walked behind both women in the direction of the office. What did you do? Albert asked at dinner, after Elizabeth had updated the family on the developments of the day. I stood still, waiting. Bosse sat in Mrs. Aliou's chair and Emily on the other available one. They both looked at me and started reading out the list of things that had gone missing since my arrival. I knew where that was going. I saw that they were looking for a scapegoat, and so I waited for them to finish and just stared at them, waiting for them to make a formal accusation, Elizabeth said. With that your killer look? Nick chuckled, and all the occupants of the table laughed. Elizabeth was known for being able to stare down any situation, even when she was in the wrong, except with their mother. Elizabeth knew better than to try that stunt with the woman. No one had won that particular battle with Gloria Alotu. Yes, I gave it to them. Then Emily asked if I had an explanation. I said no, and continued observing her. Bosse then said she would have to speak to Mrs. Aliou and recommend my dismissal. Apparently she's away for the week. I responded to that by saying that she was free to do so if she considered it to be the best course of action. They didn't know what to say after that, and Bosse told me to get back to work. I knew this was a terrible idea. Those 2 are going to pin it on you. Before you know it, someone will say it was to be expected, coming from an orphanage and all the usual nonsense people say. Their mother shook her head. I like the job. I enjoy attending to customers and I'm good at it. I have a good manner. Not everyone has the gift. A good number of salesgirls simply try to unsuccessfully mask their irritation. I don't have to pretend. Seeing a customer leave the shop happy is a plus for me. I'm not going to allow the girl from the orphanage take the blame, like living here is a bad thing. No, I have 1 week to find out who the thief is, and of course expose that person. Mama, you always say that we should defend the weak. Well now, I'm the weak. Their mother shook her head, frown on her face, but the girl knew that the woman was the first person that would fight hard for them and for their reputation. That's the spirit. And we'll help. Nick, get a pen and paper. We need to write down all we know about the suspects. Small but mighty, who was nearest to the door, ordered his older brother, who, having a good nature, went anyway. Had it been the other way around, Henry would have spent a good 30 minutes arguing about having been singled out to go on the errand. Nick came back a moment later and drew 3 columns on the paper. Means, motive, and opportunity, that's how it's done. Now, what are the names of all your colleagues? Cleaning lady included. Elizabeth dutifully supplied awaiting Nick with the answers. Add the girl that resigned to the list. Not as a suspect, she can provide valuable information, Chey suggested, as Nicholas proceeded to write down her name. Yes, you should speak to her. Something tells me that she might be sympathetic to your plight. I think she's suffered a similar fate, only in your case we might yet avoid the disastrous outcome. At least you know where she works. Do so quickly, before she disappears. Helen contributed to the conversation. So, tell us what you know about each of the suspects, Nick asked, as he turned the paper to the other side to write the information next to each name. Emily is in her 40s, married. She has 3 children. The first boy is in university. He came to pick her up one day last week, and she introduced him to us. Eloise immediately took to him. The second son is retaking the entrance exam for the university because his mother said he wants to study medicine and did not make the cut-off mark, Elizabeth said. I think what she meant is that he did not score enough to enter for any course at all. Most people would have entered for biochemistry, biology or microbiology and then tried to switch, Chidi said. Yes, that's what Eloise whispered when she told us the story. Anyway, her last child is a girl, 14 years old. Then there's Bosse. She really doesn't talk about her personal life. But one day, when she said something to Ruth in her usual curt manner, I heard Ruth murmur, "That is why you were dumped at the altar." Bosse isn't a beloved supervisor, and, frankly speaking, she's difficult to like. I remember to offer up as mortifications most of our encounters. She has this way of looking at you when she speaks to you, like she's doing you a favour by even glancing your way. Only Mrs. Aliou and Emily get to see a kinder side of her. Eloise is the only one that always has a reply for her. I think she does that because she's related to our boss, so she feels untouchable. Ruth is in her mid-20s. I know she's engaged and saving to get married. She rents a room in an apartment, and I know that her fiancé has a job that he got not long ago. Most of her conversations are about buying one thing or the other for their future home. She goes to the supermarket and always brings back catalogues and circles the things she wants and needs to save for. Then there's Adenika. She's very sophisticated, makeup and hair always in place. She also rents a room somewhere in town. Of all of us, Adenika is the most competitive. She's very good at selling, spotting customers ready to spend and getting to them before anyone else. That woman has a gift. And the cleaning lady? Chidi asked. It was another night that they were spending without electricity. Once again, it had been cut, which was another reason that Elizabeth didn't want to lose her job. Looking around the table at everyone listening attentively, and Nick and Small but Mighty writing down clues next to the burning candle, Elizabeth knew that she would have to save for a number of months to get the money to pay for her course. Her main reason for working was to help out with the household expenses. It worried her that their mother, Chidi and Uche, were paying all they had into their home. "Oh, I really don't think she should be on there," Elizabeth protested. "She's a sweet woman, kind. Reminds me of you, Mama, a mother, and I believe a widow too." "Oh, those are the kind that end up being the guilty ones. Duster in hand, she can just sweep products off the shelves and into her bucket. No one would even notice. Think about this. She's there when you stock up in the morning. All she has to do is go behind whomever is doing it and pick what she wants, like in a supermarket, except she doesn't have to pay when leaving," Nick said excitedly, his partner in crime nodding by his side. "Except she does not have access to the locked cupboards in the office. No, it has to be someone else," Elizabeth frowned. "So she says. I don't think Bosse wears the key around her neck. She probably keeps it somewhere. It's just a question of being quick. She cleans the office too, so she has ample time to take what she wants. Nick, bump her up the top of the list," Small but Mighty ordered. "Do you guys recycle the empty perfume bottles?" Uche asked, and she nodded. "Is it somewhere of easy access?" Uche asked again. "Yes, it is an open container at the back of the mall. It is emptied daily, used by all shops that have glass to dispose of," Elizabeth replied. "So it isn't difficult to get the empty tester bottles. Take them home, fill them up and make the switch. There's a black market for almost anything. Find out from other shops if they've had items that have gone missing too, or if this is only happening in yours," Uche suggested. "The first meeting of the Safe Haven Detective Club is adjourned until we get more clues, or I lose my patience and go to that shop to sort things out myself," Their mother hit her fist on the table and got up to put the sleeping Xavier to bed. The rest followed suit to clear the table and Small but Mighty to wash. He had been punished again, and so was on those duties for the week. To stay up to date with Patricia Asedegbega's work, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications.